Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept my humble obeisances of Srila Prabhupada. Thank you all for joining His Holiness Candramauli Swami Maharaj's daily call. Today, we are very fortunate to have Her Grace Gopika Radhika Mataji to enlighten us on the topic of Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, 11th chapter, verse number 32 onwards. Hare Krishna. Mataji, please accept my humble obeisances of Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for your time and association for all of us. You can please take over, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, sure. Can I? Yeah, I can share the screen, right? Okay, so we'll be doing verses 32 and 33 today. So 1:11:32.
Yes, Mataji.
Yeah. Tamatmaje drishtibirantaratmana duranta bhavah parire patim niruddhamapyasravadambu netrayor vilajjatinam bhriguvarya vaiklavat. Translation: the insuperable ecstasy was so strong that the queens, who were shy, first embraced the Lord in the innermost recesses of their hearts. Then they embraced him visually, and then they sent their sons to embrace him, which is equal to personal embracing. But, O chief amongst the Bhrigus, though they tried to restrain their feelings, they inadvertently shed tears. Purport: although due to feminine shyness, there were many hindrances to embracing the dear husband, Lord Sri Krishna. The queens performed that act by seeing him, by putting him in the cores of their hearts, and by sending their sons to embrace him. Still, the act remained unfinished, and tears rolled down their cheeks, despite all endeavors to check them. One indirectly embraces the husband by sending the son to embrace him, because the son is developed as part of the mother's body. The embrace of the son is not exactly the embrace of husband and wife from the sexual point of view, but the embrace of satisfaction from the affectionate point of view. The embrace of the eyes is more effective in the conjugal relation, and thus, according to Srila Jiva Goswami, there is nothing wrong in such an exchange of feeling between husband and wife. And then the next verse, 1:11:33. Yadyapyasau parshvagato rahogatas tathapi tasyanghri-yugam navam pade pade kavirameta tat padat chalapi yachrir najahati karhichit. Translation: although Lord Sri Krishna was constantly by their sides as well as exclusively alone, his feet appeared to them to be newer and newer. The goddess of fortune, although by nature always restless and moving, could not quit the Lord's feet. So what woman can be detached from those feet, having once taken shelter of them? Purport: conditioned living beings are always after the favor of the goddess of fortune, although by nature she is moving from one place to another. In the material world, no one is permanently fortunate, however clever one may be. There have been so many big empires in different parts of the world. There have been so many powerful kings all over the world, and there have been so many fortunate men. But all of them have been liquidated gradually. This is the law of material nature. But spiritually, it is different. According to Brahma Samhita, the Lord is served very respectfully by hundreds and thousands of goddesses of fortune. They are always in a lonely place also with the Lord. But still, the association of the Lord is so inspiringly newer and newer that they cannot quit the Lord for a moment, even though they are by nature very restless and are moving about. The spiritual relation with the Lord is so enlivening and resourceful that no one can leave the company of the Lord once having taken shelter of him. The living beings are by constitution feminine by nature. The male or enjoyer is the Lord, and all manifestations of his different potencies are feminine by nature. In the Bhagavad Gita, the living beings are designated as Paraprakriti, or the superior potency. The material elements are Aparaprakriti, or inferior potency. Such potencies are always employed for the satisfaction of the employer or the enjoyer. The supreme enjoyer is the Lord himself, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita 5:29. Is the famous Bhoktaram Yagyatapasam verse. The potencies, therefore, when engaged directly in the service of the Lord, revive the natural color, and thus there is no disparity in the relation of the potent and the potency. Generally, people engaged in service are always seeking some post under the government or the supreme enjoyer of the state. Since the Lord is the supreme enjoyer of everything in and outside the universe, it is happiness to be employed by him. Once engaged in the supreme governmental service of the Lord, no living being wishes to be relieved from the engagement. The highest perfection of human life is to seek some employment under the Lord's supreme service. That will make one extremely happy. One need not seek the moving goddess of fortune without the relation of the Lord. So just reading the translations once more. The insuperable ecstasy was so strong that the queens who were shy first embraced the Lord in the innermost recesses of their hearts. Then they embraced him visually, and then they sent their sons to embrace him, which is equal to personal embracing. But, O chief amongst the Bhrigus, though they tried to restrain their feelings, they inadvertently shed tears. Verse 33, although Lord Shri Krishna was constantly by their sides, as well as exclusively alone, his feet appeared to them to be newer and newer. The goddess of fortune, although by nature always restless and moving, could not quit the Lord's feet. So what woman can be detached from those feet, having once taken shelter of them? Om Agyantimirandhasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyati Deshatarine Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanama Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I'll stop sharing this and switch to the slides. Okay, so yeah, I thought to discuss today's two verses under these titles, which is Krishna, Akhil Rasamrit Murte, the source or reservoir of all the rasas or mellows of relationship. And then Krishna consciousness, Nitya Navanavayaman, which means it's ever new, ever fresh, in contrast to material pleasures which become stale very soon. And Krishna consciousness, the source of permanent peace and happiness, in contrast to material sources of happiness and security, which are inevitably and invariably fleeting. So verse 32 gives us a beautiful glimpse of the queens receiving Krishna after a spell of long separation. I mean, this has been an ongoing theme throughout this chapter. Krishna is returning to Dwarka, and we are getting a glimpse of all the pure devotees' emotions and reactions upon seeing their beloved Lord after such a long time. And now Krishna has entered his palace, and his queens are, as the previous verse 31 says, that they rejoiced within their minds to see their husband home after a long period abroad. And then today's verse describes how their ecstasy was so strong that despite trying their best to control their tears, they could not repress them. And they embraced their beloved Lord visually and within the cores of their hearts, and by sending their sons to embrace the Lord. And then the subsequent verse describes how, even though the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi Devi, she is known universally to be chanchala, or to be very fleeting, very flickering. She never stays in one place for a long period of time, but she always remains steadily devoted to Krishna's lotus feet and cannot quit the Lord's lotus feet at any point. So this gives us a glimpse of this feature of Krishna, which is Akhil Rasamrit Murte. Krishna is the source, the original source of all these rasas, these relationships or mellows that we see. For example, we saw these dealings of Krishna with his elders. We saw Krishna's dealings with his peers, and now we are seeing Krishna's dealings with his consorts, which is the conjugal relationship. In every aspect, in every single relationship, in every single shade of relationship or emotion or loving exchange, we see that the origin and the perfection of that loving relationship or that exchange or that emotion is Krishna. And exchanging those feelings or those relationships with Krishna is that perfect source of relishing that particular emotion or that particular relationship. So yeah, it's a very unique concept of God that we get from the Srimad Bhagavatam, that God is the source and the origin and the perfection of all these loving dealings and loving relationships. It's not necessarily present in other conceptions of God, whether philosophically or theologically speaking. God is usually, we hear this concept of God being the master or the all-powerful, the controller, the one who gives rewards and punishments. But this concept of God not only being the master, but also being a friend, and that too such an intimate friend that for example, Krishna's cowherd boyfriends, they would say, oh Krishna, what kind of strength have you got? It was because of us that you were able to lift the Govardhan hill. It is because of our company that you were able to kill that demon or this demon. And when they would sit and eat lunch together, and when a friend would taste a particular sweet, and if he thought this is a really nice sweet, he would offer Krishna his own kind of Mahaprasad. Krishna, this sweet is so good, try it. So this kind of intimacy of friendship with God, and then Krishna or God as the son, or God as the lover, as a husband, as a lover. So these concepts of God are very, very unique, and it's a special gift that we get. It's a special theological gift that the Srimad Bhagavatam gives us, revealing the actual nature of God, not just as the controller or the giver of rewards and punishments, someone who keeps track of all our activities and monitors what we are doing and sends people to heaven or hell. But no, that's one aspect of God. That's the secondary aspect of God. But we get a glimpse of God at home, God as a person. What is God like as a person? Just like the CEO of a company, a CEO has particular functions as the head of the company, but then what is he like at home? And what kind of dealings does he have at home with his own family members? That is the glimpse of God that we get from the Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's a really invaluable gift. Sometimes it's kind of easy to get accustomed to this knowledge. After some time, it becomes commonplace for us. But if we look at it from the perspective of other philosophical and theological schools of thought, then we can see very clearly that what we get from the Srimad Bhagavatam is truly a very, very unique gift. So yeah, I wanted to bring up this verse. This is basically the opening verse, the first verse of the Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu, and it also appears in Chaitanya Charitamrit Madhya Leela 8th chapter, 142nd verse. So this is where this term Akhil Rasamrit Murte appears. Akhil Rasamrit Murte Prasrimar Ruchi Ruddha Taraka Pale Kalita Shyama Lalito Radha Prayan Vidhura Jayati. Let Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, be glorified. By virtue of his expanding attractive features, he subjugated the gopis named Taraka and Pali and absorbed the minds of Shyama and Lalita. He is the most attractive lover of Srimati Radharani and is the reservoir of pleasure for devotees in all transcendental mellows. So this is the part which is referring to Akhil Rasamrit Murti, the reservoir of pleasure for devotees in all transcendental mellows. Whatever kind of shade of relationship, whatever kind of loving exchange that one can imagine or think of, the reservoir, origin and reservoir of that thing is Krishna. And Prabhupada writes in the purport, everyone has a particular transcendental mellow by which he loves and serves Krishna. Krishna is the most attractive feature for every kind of devotee. He is therefore called Akhila Rasamrita Murte, the transcendental form of attraction for all kinds of devotees, whether that devotee be in Shantaras, Dasiras, Sakyaras, Vatsalyaras, or Madhuryaras. This is the opening words of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu by Srila Rupa Goswami. So yeah, we get a beautiful glimpse of the Madhurya Ras in Swakiya Ras. Yeah, Madhurya Ras also has two shades. So there's Swakiya Ras and Parakiya Ras. So we are getting a beautiful glimpse of Madhurya Ras in Swakiya form in today's verse, Krishna's dealings with his queens of Dwarka. This is a quote from Prabhupada's discussions, philosophy discussions that he used to hold with Shamsundar and Hegre Prabhus. So this particular is a discussion on Karl Jung, where Prabhupada is saying, in any case, God is a person. And if we study man's attributes, we can also know something of God's. Just as we enjoy ourselves with friends, parents, and others, God also enjoys himself in various relationships. There are 5 primary and 7 secondary relationships that the living entities can have with God. Since the living entities take pleasure in these relationships, God is described as Akhil Rasamrit Sindhu, the reservoir of all pleasure. There's another quote pertaining to this particular aspect of Krishna. If you want to see Krishna, this is Prabhupada's lecture, October 4, 1968, Seattle. Prabhupada is saying, if you want to see Krishna as very loving friend, he is Vanshidhari, Vrindavan Bihari. If you want Krishna as loving child, then he's Gopal. If you want Krishna as loving friend, he's friend of Arjuna, just like Arjuna and Krishna. So there are 12 kinds of humors. Krishna can be accommodated with all the humors. Therefore, his name is Akhil Rasamrit Sindhu. Akhil Rasamrit Sindhu. Akhil means universal. Rasa means mellow or humor. And the ocean. So Sindhu is referring here to the ocean. Just like if you try to find out water and if you go before the Pacific Ocean, oh, unlimited water. There is no comparison how much water is there. Similarly, if you want something and if you approach Krishna, you'll find unlimited supply, just like the ocean. And we see that, I mean, Krishna, he's the supreme person like he says in the Bhagavad Gita, Bhoktaram Yakitapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. He's Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, the Lord of Lords of all the planets, of all the Brahmandas, which contains so many planets. Each Brahmanda has all these universes contained within them. Krishna is the Lord of Lords of all these lokas, all these planets, and he has countless devotees in the spiritual and material worlds put together. And he, that one supreme person, is interacting and exchanging loving dealings with every single one of them individually. Like, isn't that, I mean, that's just nothing short of incredible. People find it mind-boggling to hear that Krishna had 16,108 wives, or that he performed the rasa dance simultaneously with so many gopis. How could that be? But actually, if we look at it, there are thousands and millions and trillions, like there is no count even of living entities in all this material, in all these material and spiritual universes. And Krishna is simultaneously interacting with every single living entity at on an individual person-to-person basis. So what is so surprising if he has, 16,000 wives, or a few thousand gopis that he had a ras dance with? Like even in a temple hall, whenever we go to the temple, we see so many devotees, like in our Mayapur temple, especially on festival days, like the temple hall is crowded with like literally thousands and thousands of devotees. And at any given moment, so many devotees, they're looking at Shri Shri Radha Madhava and praying to them and gazing at them and making prayers, making pleas, interacting with Krishna. And Krishna is reciprocating with each and every one of those devotees on an individual basis. It's not like the way we see, in today's world, we have celebrities, and celebrities have all these thousands of fans. And the celebrity, that one single person, he is not even aware of all these fans that he have. I mean, the fans are aware of the celebrity has no idea of that person's existence, who might be so infatuated with that celebrity and following everything that he or she is doing and keeping track of every interview that the celebrity has given. And the celebrity, there is no reciprocation. It's just a one-sided thing. The celebrity has no idea who this person is, who is so devoted to him or her. And here we have Krishna. Every single living entity gets a direct individual reciprocation with Krishna. As soon as the living entity turns to Krishna, as soon as the living entity prays to Krishna, talks to Krishna, we Krishna responds directly on an individual basis. It's not like being in a crowd, part of a crowd, praying to one single person, and that person, who knows if he even knows whether we exist or not. That's not how it is. So yeah, Krishna is, as Prabhupada says here, you'll find unlimited supply, just like the ocean. So yeah, no wonder he's referred to as Akhil Rasamrit Sindhu. He has unlimited potency to reciprocate unlimitedly with innumerable living entities on an individual basis. And of course, and the way the living entities get that reciprocation is based on how the living entities have an attitude towards Krishna. Based on their attitude, based on their feelings, then they perceive Krishna accordingly. And that is how the relationship develops. So each living entity sees Krishna in a different way. And we see a beautiful demonstration of that when Krishna walks into the wrestling arena in Mathura after killing the elephant Kavalayapid. And this is a very famous verse where it is described how different groups of people in the entire wrestling arena perceived Krishna in their own way. And Krishna appeared to be the perfection of all those rasas to each and every group of people. So this is the translation. This is Srimad Bhagavatam 10:43-17. It says the various groups of people in the arena regarded Krishna in different ways when he entered it with his elder brother. The wrestlers saw Krishna as a lightning bolt, the men of Mathura as the best of males, the women as Cupid in person, the cowherd men as their relative, the impious rulers as a chastiser, his parents as their child, the king of the Bhojas as death, the unintelligent as the Supreme Lord's universal form, the yogis as the absolute truth, and the Vrishnis as their supreme worshipable deity. So it's the one Krishna who is being perceived in all these various forms by different groups of people, depending upon their attitude and the kind of relationship and feelings they have towards Krishna. So again, yeah, it points to the same thing. Akhil Rasamrit Murti, as Prabhupada says here, Akhil means universal and Rasa means mellow. So every kind of relationship, every kind of emotion, every shade of exchange that one can imagine or something that can exist, that can be found in Krishna, and Krishna can be perceived in those many ways. In the purport to this verse, it is written, Srila Sridhar Swami quotes the following verse, which explains the 10 attitudes towards Krishna described here. There are 10 different moods: fury perceived by the wrestlers, wonder by the men, conjugal attraction by the women, laughter by the cowherds, chivalry by the kings, mercy by his parents, terror by Kansa, ghastliness by the unintelligent, peaceful neutrality by the yogis, and loving devotion by the Vrishnis. So whatever attitude one may have, Krishna has the perfect potential to reciprocate and be perceived in the exact same manner by that person. Srila Vishwanath, this is the purport, continuing. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out that people like the wrestlers, Kansa, and the impious rulers perceive Krishna as dangerous, angry, or threatening because they fail to understand the actual position of the personality of Godhead. Actually, Lord Krishna is everyone's friend and well-wisher, but because we rebel against him, he chastises us, and thus we may perceive him as threatening. Krishna or God is actually merciful, and when he punishes us, that is also his mercy. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur quotes the following Vedic statement, Raso vai saha. He himself is rasa. So Krishna himself is the embodiment of rasa, the taste or mellow of a particular relationship. And certainly, one who achieves this rasa becomes anandi, filled with bliss. Taittiriya Upanishad 271. The purport continuing, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati quotes a further verse to explain the word rasa, that which is beyond imagination, heavy with wonder and relished in the heart shining with goodness. Such is known as rasa. As Srila Rupa Goswami elaborately explains in his Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu, there are 5 main rasas: neutrality, servitude, friendship, parental love, and conjugal love, and 7 secondary rasas: amazement, humor, chivalry, compassion, fury, fear, and dread. Thus, altogether, there are 12 rasas, and the supreme object of them all is Sri Krishna himself. In other words, our love and affection are actually meant for Sri Krishna. Unfortunately, out of ignorance, we stubbornly try to squeeze happiness and love out of material relationships, which are not directly connected to Krishna. And thus, life becomes a constant frustration. The solution is simple: surrender to Krishna, love Krishna's devotees, and be happy forever. So this is Srimad Bhagavatam 10:43-17 purport. And so, yeah, this was okay. This is this is another very nice quote that I found of Srila Prabhupada. This is from his arrival lecture, May 18, 1972, Los Angeles, where Prabhupada is saying, so because we saw so far that Krishna is Akhil Rasamrit Murti, he is the reservoir and the ultimate object of all kinds of relationships and loving dealings and emotions. So what practical relevance does this information have for us? Prabhupada is explaining in this quote. So you can also enter in the company of Krishna. So this is what's in it for me, okay, Krishna is the perfection of all the relationships. He is the perfect object of all loving dealings. So what has that got to do with me? The thing that is that I can also have that relationship with Krishna. That is the message that Krishna and his devotees give us. So as Prabhupada is saying, so you can also enter in the company of Krishna as Krishna's friend, as Krishna's servant, as Krishna's consort, as Krishna's father, anything, everything. Here also, there are 5 relationships: relationship between master and servant, relationship between friend and friend, relationship between father and son, relationship between boyfriend and girlfriend. All these relationships are emanating from Krishna, Akhila Rasamrit Sindhu, the ocean of all pleasure. And Krishna comes himself to give you this message. Krishna appeared 5,000 years ago on this planet, and at Vrindavan, he exhibited his real pastimes in the spiritual world. So just to give practical demonstration and to invite you there. Krishna is canvassing Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Braja. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. So we have got this message from Krishna, from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, from the 6 Goswamis, later on Bhakti Vinod Thakur, Bhakti Siddhanta Thakur, and we are trying our bit also to distribute this knowledge. Now 10th, 11th, 12th. My Guru Maharaj, Prabhupada is saying, my Guru Maharaj is 10th from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I, that is Prabhupada, am 11th. And you, that is Prabhupada's followers, Prabhupada was talking to his disciples, you are the 12th. So distribute this knowledge. People are suffering. They are simply fighting on some false thing, Maya. They should be given the real fact of happiness. So not only are we given the superlative understanding about God, the supermost conception of God, which is not only God as the all-powerful controller, but also God as not only God as the father, but also God as the friend, and God as the son, and God as the lover. So not only do we have this supermost conception of God, but we are also given a process by which we ourselves can enter into one of these intimate relationships with God himself. And as Prabhupada says, that has always been the mission of our entire lineage of previous acharyas, culminating with Srila Prabhupada and now his followers, which was to distribute this knowledge to people. It's like the person has this all-powerful and dearmost friend somewhere, and that person has forgotten about this relationship. And that is the main cause of that person's suffering and ignorance. So as soon as that person is told about that relationship, just like a child, that child is the son or daughter of a millionaire, but the child has lost touch with his parents and is wandering in the crowds crying. And if someone can reunite the child with the parents, that is the ultimate welfare work. That will solve all the child's problems in an instant. So that was always the mission of our entire parampara and of Srila Prabhupada and this movement that Prabhupada created to distribute this knowledge, to let people know that we have this permanent, this eternal relationship, which is the best, the supreme of all relationships with the all-powerful, supermost personality in all of existence. So just by revival of this awareness, of this remembrance, of this relationship, all one's problems can be solved. Everything else is like a temporary stopgap measure. Yes, as long as we are in these material bodies, we require these stopgap measures to sustain this material body. But ultimately, what's going to solve our problems is this knowledge that, yes, this is the person, Krishna is the person that we are eternally connected to. It's our birthright to be connected to Krishna, to have a relationship with him, to serve him, be in a relationship of service to him. And that is the thing which will give every living entity that happiness and that permanent feeling of security and pleasure that every living entity is hankering for and seeking everywhere. And that is what actually brings us to our next point that we get from these verses, which is that Krishna consciousness is nitya nava navayaman, that Krishna consciousness is ever fresh, ever new. Because as Prabhupada writes in verse 33, purport, that the association of the Lord is so inspiringly newer and newer that they cannot quit the Lord for a moment, even though the goddesses of fortune are by nature very restless and are moving about. And then Prabhupada says the spiritual relation with the Lord is so enlivening and resourceful that no one can leave the company of the Lord once having taken shelter of him. So this is in direct contrast, of course, with the material world where everything, after some time, no matter how pleasurable it is, after some time, we all have this experience, it loses its luster, it becomes stale, and we want to move on to something else. So it is because by nature, these material things do not have this particular quality, the spiritual quality of being ever fresh and ever new. Like we see this famous verse by Prahlad Maharaj, where he says, Materna Krishne Paratah Spatova Mito Bhipadyet Griha Vratanam Adanta Gobhir Vishatam Tamishram Punah Punashcharvita Charvananam. Prahlad Maharaj replied, because of their uncontrolled senses, persons too addicted to materialistic life make progress toward hellish conditions and repeatedly chew that which has already been chewed. Their inclinations towards Krishna are never aroused either by the instructions of others, by their own efforts, or by a combination of both. So this repeatedly chewing that which has already been chewed, that is something we all have experience of. I mean, that is basically the nature of anything material that we find enjoyable. We can just consider any book, even if it's our favorite book, favorite story, favorite song, favorite food stuff, favorite color, favorite piece of clothing, anything. After some time, we get bored of it. It no longer provides that pleasure which it provided us initially. I mean, this is even a common saying among people who like reading, who love books, that I wish I could read this book for the first time again. Any book which they like very much, they always say, I wish I could read it for the first time again, because they want to recapture that intense feeling of pleasure that they got by reading that book for the first time. Because no matter how good a book is, after you have read it 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, after some time, it doesn't provide that kind of pleasure which it provided initially. So and that is with everything. I mean, that is why things go into fashion and out of fashion, things fall into trend and out of trend. This material world, we constantly change because nothing is able to sustain and provide the same level of happiness and utility and pleasure that we as spirit souls need. So that is basically the intrinsic nature of anything material, whatever we may take. And Krishna consciousness is the direct opposite of that, because as Prabhupada says, there is matter and there is antimatter. So whatever is the nature of something material, its spiritual counterpart, by definition, has the exact opposite properties. So matter, it becomes stale, and spirit, what is spirit, it never becomes stale. It always remains ever fresh and ever new. And that is the nature of Krishna and his devotional service. And we find, for instance, in this verse, this is the 10th canto, chapter 13, first verse, Srila Shukdev Goswami is saying to Maharaj Parikshit that, O best of devotees, most fortunate Parikshit, you have inquired very nicely. For although constantly hearing the pastimes of the Lord, you are perceiving his activities to be newer and newer. So yeah, he's constantly hearing, but still he's deriving more and more taste from those narrations. And then it's described in the purport. It is said that it is the nature of a devotee to constantly apply his mind, energy, words, ears, etc. in hearing and chanting about Krishna. This is called Krishna consciousness. And for one who is wrapped in hearing and chanting about Krishna, the subject matter never becomes hackneyed or old. That is the significance of transcendental subject matter in contrast to material subject matter. Material subject matter becomes stale and one cannot hear a certain subject for a long time. He wants change. But as far as transcendental subject matter is concerned, it is called Nitya Navanavayaman. This means that one can go on chanting and hearing about the Lord and never feel tired, but remain fresh and eager to hear more and more. And actually, the lives of all the devotees over here, it is a testimony to this fact. It is not possible to be chanting the same mantra over and over and over again, like for days, weeks, months, years, decades, as so many devotees have been doing, reading the same Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam year after year, performing the same deity worship year after year, and still we are deriving taste. So this is actually a direct proof. It's a first-hand proof. It's an experiential proof of this fact that it truly is Nitya Navnavayaman. Even at our stage where we may not be, at least speaking for myself, we may not be that much advanced, and we are very much covered up by the material modes of nature. But even in this state, Krishna consciousness is able to give a taste that enables us to sustain our practice of Krishna consciousness day after day, month after month, year after year, decade after decade. So it's empiric proof of this fact. And then concluding with this point that, so yes, Krishna consciousness is ever new, ever fresh, and also it is the source of permanent peace and happiness. So on one hand, yes, we always want something which is ever new and ever fresh, but there is also another characteristic of the living entity, which is that we are by nature eternal and permanent. And so we are also seeking for something which is equally eternal and permanent. We want a permanent shelter. We want something which stays with us always and which can always be relied upon, depended upon, and which will never go away or betray us, or which will not get destroyed. And that is Krishna. Nothing else in the material world gives that experience or that security. So this is, for instance, just one verse among many in our Shastras regarding this particular aspect. This is from Mother Devaki's prayers to Lord Krishna after he makes his appearance from her womb. She's saying, "O inaugurator of the material energy, this wonderful creation works under the control of powerful time, which is divided into seconds, minutes, hours, and years. This element of time, which extends for many millions of years, is but another form of Lord Vishnu. For your pastimes, you act as the controller of time, but you are the reservoir of all good fortune. Let me offer my full surrender unto your lordship." No one in this material world has become free from the four principles of birth, death, old age, and disease, even by fleeing to various planets. But now that you have appeared, my Lord, death is fleeing in fear of you. And the living entities, having obtained shelter at your lotus feet by your mercy, are sleeping in full mental peace. So she's describing initially how the material world, it is fully governed by all-powerful time, which is divided into seconds, minutes, hours, and years. And that constantly, and this existence of time, this constant, time is always ticking by. It doesn't stop even for a moment. So this makes everything impermanent. Everything is destructible because as soon as its time is over, it gets destroyed. But as Mother Devaki is saying here, that death itself, that death which makes everything impermanent, that death itself is fleeing in fear of you, Krishna. And the living entities, having obtained shelter at Krishna's lotus feet, are now sleeping in full mental peace. So that permanent peace, that restful repose, that feeling that, yes, now I've come to a place where I can never be destroyed, something that can never let me down, that is not fleeting, that can always be depended upon. That feeling can be had only in Krishna consciousness under Krishna's shelter. In the purport, Prabhupada writes to this, in the purport of this verse, Prabhupada writes, there are different categories of living entities, but everyone is afraid of death. The highest aim of the karmis is to be promoted to the higher heavenly planets, where the duration of life is very long. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Sahasra Yoga Paryantam Maharyad Brahmano Viduh. One day, 12 hours of Brahma equals 1,000 yugas, and each yuga consists of 320,000 years. Similarly, Brahma has a night of 1,000 times 4,320,000 years. In this way, we may calculate Brahma's month and year. But even Brahma, who lives for millions and millions of years, Dviparardha Kala, also must die. So something may be very, very, very long in duration, but it is not eternal. There will always remain a difference between eternity and something which is very long but is time bound. And anything which is time bound, no matter how long it is just a drop. It is just a flash in comparison to eternity. And we as spirit souls, we are eternal. So no matter how long a lifespan there may be, at one point it is going to come to an end, and that end is incompatible with our nature, intrinsic nature as an eternal spirit soul. According to Vedic Shastra, the inhabitants of the higher planetary system live for 10,000 years. And just as Brahma's day is calculated to equal, this is once 10, 100,000, 10,000, 100,000, million. Okay, 4 billion, 3 million of our years. One day in the higher planetary system equals 6 of our months. Karmis therefore try for promotion to the higher planetary systems, but this cannot free them from death. In this material world, everyone from Brahma to the insignificant ant must die. Therefore, this world is called Martyaloka. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Brahma bhavana loka punaravartino Arjuna. As long as one is within this material world, either on Brahmaloka or on any other loka within this universe, one must undergo the Kala Chakra of one life after another, bhutva bhutva praliyate. But if one returns to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, yad gatva na nivartante, one need not re-enter the limits of time. Therefore, devotees who have taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord can sleep very peacefully with this assurance from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, Tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti. After giving up the present body, a devotee who has understood Krishna as he is need not return to this material world. The constitutional position of the living entity is eternity. Na hanyate hanyamane sharire, nitya shashvatoyam. Every living entity is eternal. But because of having fallen into this material world, one wanders within the universe, continually changing from one body to another. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Brahmanda Brahmite Kona Bhagavana Jiva, Guru Krishna Prasade Paya Bhakti Lata Bija. Everyone is wandering up and down within this universe, but one who is sufficiently fortunate comes in contact with Krishna consciousness by the mercy of the spiritual master and takes to the path of devotional service. Then one is assured of eternal life with no fear of death. So this is the gift of Krishna consciousness that we get from the Srimad Bhagavatam and our other bhakti scriptures. They tell us God in his supreme features. They tell us the process by which we can enter into a permanent relationship with the Lord. And that permanent relationship is the only thing which is compatible with our own intrinsic nature as an eternal spirit soul, which is seeking for a source of eternal bliss and happiness, an eternal relationship which is ever new and which never grows stale, unlike things in the material world. And that relationship is established with Krishna through the process of Bhakti Yoga, which also, incidentally, fortunately, it happens to be the easiest process in existence of all the yoga systems. So thank you very much, Srimati Mataji. I'll conclude here with this.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji. Thank you for explaining these two verses, Akhila Rasamrita Mukti and the concept of Krishna consciousness. And you mentioned about a lot of things like Srila Prabhupada quotes. And yeah, thank you for sharing everything, Mataji. Very nice class. Thank you. You nicely compiled everything. Yes, Mataji. Thank you so much. Yeah, as you said, like whenever we hear about Krishna Katha, even though we chant daily the same mantra, we chant, we listen to the kirtans and we listen to Bhagavatam classes and read Bhagavatam. on and on, keep on going, even though we don't get exhausted and we don't get, satiated, that we don't get satisfaction also. We want to hear more and more to different speakers and different aspects of Bhagavatam. Yes, Mataji, that's very true. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Dear devotees, if you have any questions or comments or realizations, please go ahead. Raj Prabhu, please go ahead.
Thank you. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Guru Maharaj, all glories to devotees. Thank you for that interesting and enlightening class strategy. I actually have two questions. Maybe I'll ask the first, and if there's time, I can ask the second. In one of your slides, I remember you were saying that all our love, the love that we're developing, we should be directing it to Krishna. And then you mentioned, and his devotees.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just curious about what's in that and devotees, because I remember elsewhere in the Bhagavatam, I think.
Sorry, I didn't catch that sentence. What is?
About directing, you mentioned about directing our love to Krishna and his devotees.
Right.
And I just wondered what you meant in that, because I also hear from the Bhagavatam, elsewhere in the Bhagavatam, that well, actually, if we look at any of the great Vaishnavas, because we follow their lead,
Mm-hmm.
all the great Vaishnavas, they have so much compassion for non-devotees.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted you to clarify for me my understanding on what you mean by love Krishna and his devotees. And presumably we still should be compassionate to the non-devotees, but then is everyone a devotee inherently anyway? But what is meant in that specific passage?
Right. Okay, yeah, what you said, it brings to mind one particular verse. I'm just trying to look up that verse. Okay. Okay, yeah, this is the verse. It is okay. What should I'll just share the screen and okay. So this is in the 10th canto. To 10, chapter 41, 51. Okay. Chapter 41. Oops, sorry. Chapter 51. Yeah, okay. This is basically the context is Krishna when he enters Mathura, and there's this garland maker Sudama who makes these beautiful garlands and offers them to Krishna, Balaram, and all their friends. And when Krishna offers him benediction, it says that Sudama, the garland maker, he chose unshakable devotion for Krishna, the supreme soul of all existence, friendship with his devotees, and transcendental compassion for all living beings. So yeah, it's kind of referring to the same point that you brought up, Prabhuji. Yeah, there is friendship with devotees, and also there's compassion for other living beings. So I guess yes, there is a feeling. I mean, in friendship and compassion, they are both positive feelings, but also there is a certain difference between these two things. So friendship is relating to a person in a slightly different way as compared to compassion. I mean, we associate with devotees, but in terms of preaching, we may associate with non-devotees out of compassion, but it is not in the same way that we associate with like-minded devotees, for instance. Like sometimes we also hear this phrase, right, that we give association, but we don't necessarily take association in the context of non-devotees. So I guess, yeah, that is probably the shade of meaning. Also, when we see in Chaitanya Charitamrita the dealings of a Madhyam Adhikari, are described, that also describes the same hierarchy. There is love for God and friendship with devotees, and respect for the senior devotees, friendship with peers, and compassion for juniors. So somehow, we see that our scriptures, they do make this kind of subtle distinction between what is friendship and what is compassion. So friendship is with those who are equal, and there is a mutual give and take of feelings and realizations, and we want to benefit from each other's association. Whereas in terms of compassion, it is more oriented towards giving, but not necessarily coming under the sway of their influence. In terms of devotees, we want to get influenced by other like-minded devotees. We want to catch their feelings of bhakti. But in terms of non-devotees, we don't necessarily want to catch their feelings or their influences, but rather just give what we can to them in order to revive their Krishna consciousness. So perhaps that would be the subtle distinction. But yes, definitely both are positive feelings. There is no animosity, there is no contempt. There is no feeling of us and them, and they're karmis and we are devotees. It's not that. The feeling is still positive, but yeah, there is the slight distinction that we want to be influenced by devotees, but we don't want to get influenced by the non-devotees. We want to influence them by the scriptures and by Krishna's teachings, etc. Does that address what you were asking to some degree?
Yes. May I ask a question to clarify?
Sure. Yes, Prabhuji.
So it's like friendship and compassion. Are they like different flavors of love? What is the relationship with them and the word love?
Yeah, actually, I didn't think of them in that way, but I think I would tend to agree, Prabhuji. Yeah, it does make sense that they are both two different flavors of love, of a feeling of concern for someone else's well-being. Love in one sense is when it's not about me, it is about the other person. So perhaps that can take many different shades. And with peers, with our equals, it would take the form of friendship. And with someone who is junior or dependent, it would, like even in a parent-child relationship, when a child is very small, then it's more of a feeling of compassion or just taking care of the child, extending oneself towards to take care of the needs of the child, rather than necessarily a reciprocal on an equal footing kind of relationship. But yeah, in both cases, it's the focus is the other person. It's the selflessness is the core, but the way it is expressed is different. Yeah, you're right, Prabhuji. They would be both different manifestations of love.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that for me.
Thank you, Prabhuji. And actually, even in terms of Krishna, then we see that this distinction is made, because both this verse that I showed just now and the verse where the Madhyamadhikari's duties are given, the aspect of devotion or love is reserved for Krishna, and it is described there is respect for seniors, friendship with peers, compassion for the subordinates, but the aspect of prema or love is, that the supreme object of that is only Krishna. So we find even this particular distinction. There is Krishna, there are the devotees, and there are the others who are not yet devotees, or they are devotees, but they don't know yet that they are devotees, and we are trying to bring them to that awareness.
So what is it then that, what is that connection with Krishna's devotees then? Because I always thought that was love as well. But is that something else?
Perhaps it is this thing that the central point over here is Krishna. Like we love them because they are connected to Krishna. Like Prabhupada used to say, right, a mother, she loves her child, and so if she spots any of the child's belongings, she remembers the child and she takes care of them because they are connected to the child. It's not that she has love for the child's shoes or the child's bag or the child's clothes. No, she loves the child, and that is why that thing extends to all the things belonging to the child. So yeah, the one-on-one, the loving connection is reserved only for Krishna. And then because these are Krishna's devotees, Krishna loves his devotees more than anyone else. And so there is this feeling of love for Krishna's devotees as well. But the central point, what connects us with other devotees, is Krishna. It's not independent. It's not something. That would be perhaps the explanation.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Abhijit.
If nobody else got a question, now can I ask my second question?
Yeah, sure. Yes, Roshi.
You mentioned the different types of rasas that we can have or we may have with Krishna. And I don't know if rasa is a word that's reserved for devotees that are more advanced, or if it's general for even devotees that are only still trying to be devotees. But certainly there is Krishna's reciprocation, as we learn elsewhere. Krishna's reciprocation is with everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to connect these things together. First of all, if you can explain, what is the rasa? Who is that for? I mean, is rasa only with advanced devotees?
I guess perhaps we would say that, like, because each of us are inherently, eternally connected to Krishna. So rasa is something which is intrinsically, it's always a part of us. Like, we are always connected to Krishna. It's just that right now it's covered up, it's dormant. We are not aware of it. We have become forgetful of it because of all these modes of material nature, the layers of our conditioning. But yeah, it's always existing, and it's just about Krishna consciousness is the process of uncovering it. It's uncovering something which has always been there all along. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Any more questions or comments? Anybody? As Matajis and Prabhujis? Yes, Mataji, I don't think there are any more.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Mataji, for once again for this presentation and answering Raj Prabhu's questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and devotees. Tomorrow we'll meet again with ISKCON Harrisburg class by Guru Maharaj. Thank you all so much. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhu ki jai, Radhika Mataji ki jai.
Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mata.